There's kind of a big juxtaposition in the cannabis market overall, or in the cannabis community rather. There's the farmers, there's the
Mhm.
growers, there's people like myself who, grow
Right.
organic produce and have forever. And then there's some thugs wannabes, and some, you know, people who just largely don't really care about integrity and the environmental integrity of a product, or the health based integrity of a product that's going out there. And that's always been there in the cannabis community. I think this may be a time where we're seeing that more.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, money breeds unethical behavior.
Right.
It's easier to make the wrong choice for money. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that like these business owners are personally greedy. Sometimes you have a financial responsibility to your investors to
Hmm.
make a payment. And if you don't, all of your employees go without jobs. And it's very easy as a business owner to look at your 15, 20 employees and say, they have mortgages, they need to
Right.
buy groceries, their payroll will be missed if I don't sell these pounds that
Yeah.
have mold on them. And so as a patient, you'd be like, that guy's a horrible person. How could he possibly sell us moldy weed? But it was still maybe not necessarily about their greed. Maybe they didn't even get any of that money. It's just the
Yeah.
the nature of business. And
Right.
with cannabis, we don't normally factor in that kind of assumed loss. If we're growing corn, we would never expect to harvest every plant of corn.
Hmm.
Like we would never expect that every ear is necessary. And with cannabis, that's the case. We
Yes.
need every nub.
Yeah,
We're sweeping the
certainly.
floor. So it's a different world, and part of that comes from regulation. If you've only got so much canopy, then
Yeah.
you got to maximize it. If you've got
Right.
limited veg, sometimes you got to make choices that are not ideal for the way you would want to harvest. And the same thing is very much true in the world of concentrates.
Mhm.
When someone's growing cannabis, the marker has always been yield. So you ask a grower, they're going to tell you things like, oh, I get 2 or 3 pounds of light. They're not going to tell you, oh, I generate 25% resin content on all of my biomass. They're not going to give you the information you care about,
Right.
because whether you're smoking flower or concentrate, the resin is the only thing that matters. No
Yeah.
amount of leaf is good or better or worse, like it's all
Right.
extra.
Yeah.
But growers have always been growing for weight because that's
Uh-huh.
the way you buy it.
Hence the dense
And
buds that we're seeing these days. Mm.
exactly. Well, and even the dense buds, those come from black market trafficking. That you see things like haze go away when you've got to pack
Yeah.
it into a vacuum seal bag and run it from California to Chicago. You don't want, like when you think about how fluffy an ounce could be, like you want the densest one you can get if it's already got to
Yeah.
go. And the dense
True.
buds are less affected by the vacuum sealing as well, so it looks better when you break it out of that package. Like all of that is justified by like these really temporary conditions of needing to traffic it the way that we do.
Yeah.
If you talk
For
to
an aesthetics
most
based market,
people,
right? Right.
exactly
Yeah.
right, yeah, and even in the aesthetics market, most people would still buy a fluffier bud, but I can't vacuum seal that the way that I can a dense PGR rock. So
Right.
that decision is still kind of monetary and based on feeding a market that's maybe not the same as what you would experience walking into a dispensary. That's why we didn't see CBD flower for so long, because traditionally CBD flowers were ugly,
Hmm.
because they were being bred for the resin. They were being
Yeah.
bred for the CBD. It was never about the flower. But that's the way that people want to grow it.
Yeah.
The way that people want to buy it.
They
You
want to
want those
buy it.
pretty
Yeah.
buds.
It is a
So
lot more loose, and yeah, bud structure wise, a lot more loose. It actually, though, has a higher resistance to molds and mildews. So, yeah.
exactly, because a tight bud is not good for
Right.
any healthy plant.
Yes.
And that's the same of like your tomatoes. If you have a tomato off of every node, that plant is going to struggle. It's not happy doing that. Like
Right.
everything needs a little bit of space to breathe. And it's hard to find that type of care and consideration in the growing process to transfer all the way to the end where it's being sold, because there's so many people in between that consumer. If
Yeah.
you knew your source, you would have tried their haze before and said, this gets me so high, I love it.
Yeah.
And even though if you just had to look at 2 different ounces in bags, it would never be the most appealing one, you would know that it was because you'd tried it, you know? And that's where that like personal relationship comes into play. It creates a level of trust that you'd be willing to buy something that doesn't look like what you're used to, doesn't smell like what you're used to.